My name is Taisha Wood. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. I am currently located in Arizona. My background's in law enforcement. I was a police officer and detective for 17 years. I worked in the tribes here in Arizona. The majority of my time I was a police detective. I worked crimes against children. Currently, I do contract work for the Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center. Yes, the Human Capacity Building Center. It's a lot to say, so we will say the center for short throughout the day. So when I say the center, I'm referring to the Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center. Now, what is a center? The center is a coaching and development hub working with tribes and organizations which serve tribal communities. We help them by starting, sustaining, or growing their anti-trafficking work. Today's Talking Circle, thank you for joining us, is sponsored by the center. This time that we share together within the Talking Circle, we bring together skilled practitioners with you, the registered participants, to discuss topics related to human trafficking and Native communities. If you take a look at our website, you will find videos and Q&A summaries of previous talking circles that we've held with the past. As you know, human trafficking is a difficult topic. Sometimes it's really hard to talk about these topics, and we've been talking about a lot. But today during our session, if at any time you feel like you need to talk to someone for support, or just, someone that you feel like you need to share things with, please contact Strong Hearts Native Helpline. The numbers on your screen. Strong Heart Native Helpline is a culturally appropriate and anonymous helpline for Native Americans impacted by domestic violence, dating, and sexual violence. Their contact, again, is available on the screen. We will post the number in the chat for you to reference during the discussion. Again, that is a resource available to you throughout the webinar. If you need the number again, we will post it in the chat. Feel free to just send us the question in chat, and we will post it again if you don't write down the number from the screen right now. Now, what are we going to talk about today? Like I said, we have a great panel ready to share their information, ready to share their work. We're going to talk about human trafficking. I encourage you during this time to think about yourself and what works best for you and your own well-being. If you have those items that make you stronger, that give you support, whether it be cultural items, please feel free to use those anytime during this discussion. All of the work that we're presenting and sharing requires meaningful attention by all those who do this work, including those of you who are joining us. Please make sure and take a moment to center yourself. Now, to lead us off in a good way, I have my friend Emilia Simenov, a traditional healer from Alaska, who will offer an opening prayer. Emilia?
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I am Emilia Simenov. I am from Anchorage. My family comes from Kodiak and Old Harbor. Please protect our hearts while we are learning, and guide us the right path to keep doing what we are here today to learn and to do and to help. Thank you for this wonderful day. Thank you for the land that we are on. Thank you for our family and friends, and thank you for the panelists and everyone attending. Please bless us. Keep us safe. Guide us and allow us to do what we need to do. Koyana. Oho.
Thank you, Emilia, for that beautiful prayer, that beautiful guidance, and that support you provided us. Now, I've been talking a lot about this panel, and I think we're good to go. We had a good prayer to lead us. I want to, at this time, turn you over to our next speaker. That is our moderator, Desiree. She's going to guide this conversation. Actually, before I do that, let's talk about some terminology we're going to hear today. And I want to, maybe it's terminology that you've heard before, but I thought let's do a foundation here and mention some terms that you're going to hear and what they mean. First, human trafficking. Human trafficking is a crime occurring when someone is used for force, sex, or labor. Any child under the age of 18, exchanging any item of value for a sex act is protected by the law as a victim of trafficking. This protection exists regardless of their willingness to exchange in a sex act, to engage in a sex act, Again, that's human trafficking. Now, another term you may hear is trauma. So what is trauma? Trauma comes from an event or a series of events or a set of circumstances that create physically and emotionally harmful or threatening experiences. Now, when we talk about trauma, trauma is connected to the term historical trauma. So what is historical trauma? Historical trauma is intergenerational trauma experienced by a specific cultural group that has a history of being systematically oppressed. Historical trauma can have an impact on psychological and physical health. So remember, have those items of support if you need to hold on to something that'll through this conversation, or again, that Strong Hearts number. If we could have it in the chat again, please post that Strong Hearts number for you. Now, as we know, within our tribal communities, individual experiences with violence and historical trauma put our people, American Indians and Alaskan Natives, at a higher risk to experience human trafficking. During our discussion today, during this time that we have together, the moderator, Desiree, my friend Desiree, and the panelists will talk about human trafficking and trauma with a focus on supporting survivors on their healing journey. Now that we've covered those terms, and I've introduced you to Desiree unofficially, right now I want to officially introduce my friend Desiree. Let's get started. Desiree Coyote will be our moderator today. Desiree?
Thank you, Taisha. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today. I know everyone's got a busy schedule. This is definitely a very important topic. A little bit about me. I am an enrolled member and employed with the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. And I'm also a field advisory member for the Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center. So joining me today are two panelists, Guadalupe Lopez and Luanne Jacques. I invite each of them to say hello and offer a brief introduction. Guadalupe, let's start with you.
Well, Bonjour relatives, Jawana Obenesikwe Indigenous Kazmangandondem. My name is Guadalupe Lopez. I am a citizen of Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe in Minnesota. My father comes from Michoacan, Mexico, and we are Perpetua Indians from that region. I currently am the executive director to Violence Free Minnesota, which is the statewide domestic violence coalition ending relationship abuse. But before this, I worked for the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition, and I was one of the researchers in the report Garden of Truth, where we interviewed 105 Indigenous Native relatives in the state of Minnesota, understanding their survival and events of prostitution and sex trafficking. Good to be here today.
Welcome, Guadalupe. Luanne, on to you.
Hello, good to see everyone. My name is Luanne Jacques, and I'm an enrolled member of Rosebud Sioux Tribe. I'm Lakota, and I'm also mestizo from the Northern Mountains and Andes Mountains of Colombia. That's where I was born. But I grew up in Athabascan country in rural Alaska, and I now live on Dena'ina Athabascan land here in Anchorage, Alaska. And I'm coming to you from South Central Foundation as a senior learning development advisor with our Family Wellness Warriors program. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, Luanne, and thank you. Excuse me. I did want to do an honorary mention for our panelist who was not able to make it today, and that was Megan. Definitely miss her presence here. Look forward to working with her again. To start our discussion, I'd like to ask our panelists a few questions. Following these opening questions, we will shift to your participant questions. Please please enter your questions at any time in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Guadalupe, we're going to start with you. Would you please explain historical trauma and its relationship to a Native-specific view of intergenerational transmission of trauma?
Sure. So I'd first like to start out by explaining when I was younger. So I was born in the cities. I never got to live on my reservation. Went there for the very first time when I was 14 years old. My mother is a survivor of boarding school. And we were talking about, I met somebody in the community, and for some reason I had an attraction to want to be next to her, to know who this person was, whatever. And after we worked out for a little while, I found out that this person was blood related to me. When I ended up talking to my mom about it, she's like, that's blood memory. And so I was like, what is that? She's like, that's when your blood understands and you know something, right? You know, we can call this intuition, we can call this blood memory, and all these things. And I would, so as a 13-year-old or a 13-year-old, I was just taken back by that blood memory. I also knew that when a mother is with child, at a certain point in the mother's life, she's carrying almost 3 generations with her. A baby is born with all the eggs that they will ever have to give birth to children if they so choose. So if you think about it, if there's one person who is holding a baby, whether that be female or male, now that baby is born, or gender is going to be a female, the ovaries will start producing their eggs. So at one time, there's like 3 generations in one person. And we can get our resiliencies and we can get traumas from blood memory. So I also think there's been like science. So we have the work of Dr. Emoto when he's talking about water. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it all comes together as far as, so humans we have like roughly 60% of our body is made of water. Now, Dr. Emoto was looking at how water is exposed to loving and compassionate intention, and how it changed the water molecules. He also started to do an opposite effect, where he was talking about unpleasant words and noise and attention, and it would physically change the molecular formations of the water. And you can look at it up online. There's like documentaries on it. And the reason why I say this is that if when we're talking about our own water and how that trauma comes, sometimes that comes from our own life experiences, but sometimes that comes from generations that we didn't even know that we carried past and past. And so sometimes we'll have fears that we don't necessarily recognize, or we do recognize them. They will come together as in an individual or as a group of people. Why do we not trust the medical profession? Why do our communities hold in a different kind of humor? All of the things that are either looked at as a positive or a resiliency or in trauma. I think one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up is because we're all connected. And when we have relatives who are suffering from surviving genocide, when we are surviving sexual and domestic violence and murdered and missing our relatives and with no justice and no support looking for our people, that bleeds out a different kind of trauma. And I think that that helps, like, it creates something. I mean, if we have a generation that was living through boarding school, who was taught to be quiet, to be silent about the maltreatment and the abuse or the death and murders witnessed during some of those times, and that was the conditioning, you're silent. Now the next generation, what are they learning from that? What are they learning from the silence? And so I think that now there's new people born every day. We have new medicine people being born every day. We have dreamers, new people to hold all of these great things. And I think that we have to hold both of those in balance. So I feel like I talked about, it's hard to explain that in like a couple of short minutes, but I kind of want to open it up to maybe Desiree or Luanne, if you had anything else you'd like to mention with that.
Luanne, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I really appreciate, Guadalupe, you sharing your family's knowledge around blood memory. I think that is something that really speaks to that feeling of connection. And I know I grew up wondering about certain griefs and certain anger that didn't seem to start with me. Like, where did this come from? Where is there something wrong with me? And if we enter, it's so important. It's so important for the people that we're working with within the community, and when we're working within government structures, for people to have an understanding around historical trauma, because otherwise the assumption is, well, the issues just started with this generation, or the issues are right here in front of us, and there's no compassion, and there's no the programming that is put in place will fail unless there is a understanding around historical trauma. And that goes too with understanding why what's going on with human trafficking. Stop finding a solution for it will never be complete unless we take in and factor in historical trauma and complex trauma.
And I also found it interesting with Dr. Emoto, his work with water and how that impacts human beings. Since we're mainly made of water, a lot of people who have done domestic violence and sexual assault work, we talk a lot about, especially victim-based advocacy, talk a lot about flesh memory, body memory, which really leads into what Guadalupe was talking about. So I want to move to the next question, and Luanne, this is for you. What are trauma-informed services? What are 3 policies or practices that victim service providers can adopt to ensure that their services are both trauma-informed and culturally appropriate for Native victims of trafficking?
Yeah, and I'll share a bit, and then I'd also love to invite Guadalupe to share her perspective on this question as well. So trauma-informed, what does that mean? I feel like it's researchers came along and gave a name for something that we have known ancestrally, and that is our stories matter, that we are not just a sum of our actions, and we are a sum of our stories. And it's not just our stories, it's our ancestors' stories. We carry that. And so a trauma-informed response is one that says, what is the story behind this person's eyes? You know, they're presenting here, there's this issue, there's this health issue, there's this social issue happening, but there is a story here. And my job in order to provide good care is to learn their story. And a trauma-informed response also is one that is not hierarchical. And again, this is a This is something that our relatives knew, as a non-hierarchical. We are in this journey together. I also have a story. You have a story, and I will share a piece of my story with you to make it safe for you to share a piece of your story with me. When I'm working with people, one of the things that are in situations of trauma is that's the starting place. Is I have story too, and I share my story pieces. I don't burden them with my life, right? But just letting them know that I too am a survivor of child sexual abuse, of sexual assault, of domestic violence, that I'm not an expert, but I'm here to walk alongside you through this journey. Another thing I would say is in a trauma informed, this is like working with a person in the moment. A trauma informed response is responding with the thing that they wanted to hear in the moment they were hurt, but never did. Oftentimes when we're hurt, we long to hear things like, it wasn't your fault, I believe you. And those are the things that we never get to hear. And so when we are privileged enough to be let into someone's, that sacred space where they're trusting us with a piece of their trauma, we can actually be a part of the healing by giving a trauma-informed response. And I like to think about it, what is it that they wanted to hear, that they needed to hear, that they didn't hear in the moment they were harmed? What did they need in that moment? And can I provide that in this interaction? The other thing is more from a systems perspective is, so we work in healthcare, we work in a tribal healthcare system, and we were very privileged that in the decades before us, that Indigenous leaders took on the responsibility of providing healthcare, and we actually own our own healthcare here in Alaska, and that is unique. They compacted with the federal government. And so our healthcare system is one that is based on this idea of everyone has a story and people are whole people. So when I walk into a space, I can immediately see if I'm bringing trauma with me, or someone that is being seen in the system is bringing trauma. Immediately, if they're just coming in because they have an earache or a toothache, but the providers are trained to listen for story, to invite story, to take time for story. And maybe what I need to see is actually, I need to be seeing a behavioral health person right there in that same appointment. I need to be seeing intensive case manager support right in that same appointment. The thing is when if I in a different kind of system, I would be sent away. I would be coming with trauma and I would be sent, well, make an appointment with behavioral health or come back and talk to a case manager to get into shelter, things like that. But I am there as a customer, as a patient, or the people that we're serving are there in that moment. And that's the moment we have them. Let's meet their need. Let's stay with them until their need is met, and do it in a relational, story-based way. So that's the beauty of tribal healthcare, when we're owning our own healthcare and we're saying this is the kind of care, because it's us, right? I'm being served in the system that is also serving my family. I'm leading in the system that is also serving my family. I want to be treated like a whole person that carries a whole story. And so in our systems, it's setting it up in that way is really important.
And Luanne, I loved how you put that, seeing the story behind the eyes. A lot of folks, I think what's key for me is that a lot of Indigenous folks, a lot of human beings have that aspects, that sense about them. Just a lot of us don't tap into that because we're so busy with the schedule that we've got to keep, et cetera, et cetera. And I love how you tied that to systems and how we need to be making this more human for the Indigenous folks that we're working with. I do see a couple of questions here, and one that I want to definitely have you tackle, Luanne, is from anonymous attendee. What is complex trauma, and how might it impact a Native survivor of human trafficking?
That's a great question. So complex trauma is a way to look at layered trauma. So Guadalupe powerfully spoke to historical trauma. So I can use my own family as an example. So within me, I carry trauma of those that came before me. So the trauma of genocide, the trauma of mass illness, the trauma of boarding schools that are just one generation before me, 2 generations before me. That also contributes to the intergenerational trauma in which the way that my parents raised me. And so the home that I grew up in was imperfect based on the traumas that they carried and passed forward. So I'm carrying those traumas. Also, I also experienced domestic violence, child sexual abuse, and and sexual assault in my growing up years from people that were outside of my immediate family as well. So I'm carrying that layered trauma as well. And then you grow up in a system that is unfriendly to people of color. And so it might be traumas that are experienced in the workplace, or traumas that are experienced with law enforcement. So that's another layer of trauma. So, and then if someone, grows up and goes away to war, there's combat trauma, or in our communities, our rural communities, especially, oftentimes we are our own first responders. And so growing up in a rural community, it was your cousin or your brother that you were responding to when, they went missing, or they were, there was an accident of some kind, or a suicide. And so there's that first responder trauma that is someone that you love and that you know well. So these layered traumas, that's what we talk about with complex trauma. And I believe the second portion of the question was, how does it impact survivors of human trafficking? The ACE study is a great one that bears out that people that experience traumas are more vulnerable. And oftentimes it can make a person more susceptible to experiencing trauma as an adult, more vulnerable. And it's not that it is a self-fulfilling prophecy that this will happen, but oftentimes you are more vulnerable to experiencing trafficking because of what you've been through.
So before I continue with the attendee questions, there was one other question I would like for you to answer, Luanne. And the question is, how can traditional cultural practices be integrated into addressing trauma from a healthcare perspective? And would you share some examples?
Yeah, so I shared a bit in having that whole system of care, how we start with story first. We start with building relationship and treating people as whole people. And that is something that we were taught, and we learned from elders in shaping this healthcare system. So the department that I work in is called Family Wellness Warriors. And I'll give you a little bit of context around that and how traditional values shaped the work that we do. It was started by a group of Alaska Native and Native American elders who came together, and they asked the community, they asked our community here, what is it that you want us to go after? What do you want us to tackle? And the community came back and said, we want you to tackle child sexual abuse, domestic violence, and child neglect. And so right then they had the voice of the community empowering them. The other thing that was really key was that this movement was started by elders, and elders were the first ones to break the silence and to share their stories of trauma. And what that did was that gave permission to the other generations coming along, like my generation, that had grown up believing and being told, shh, we don't talk about those things. We hold those things in the privacy of our homes and of our communities. Seeing elders breaking silence and sharing those stories gave us permission to share our stories as well. And the other thing I mentioned, a non-hierarchical approach. of it's not that I am, if any one of us that are facilitating in these healing circles and in these healing trainings, we are not experts in anyone else's life. We are just co-travelers along the journey. We are just sitting here in this circle together. So those are some of the things that we applied in the work that we do. The other thing I would say that is really important is working with both sides, working with both people who have been harmed, experienced harm, and people who have caused harm. That is very important and taught to us by our elders. And we don't, in our work, we don't use the words victim and perpetrator, because we want to, there's a lot of baggage that those words carry. And we want to talk about people who have experienced harm and people who have caused harm, knowing that sometimes we ourselves have been on both sides of that line in different ways. And it's not about enabling those who cause harm and those who are causing harm in a community. It's not at all. The way I best heard it explained was by a Native elder, and she was talking about why we must work with both sides. And she said, in order for the circle to be mended, everyone must be a part of the circle, even those who broke it. And so that's why when in our trainings, we work with people who have caused harm. What we often find, I mean, there's a lot, because of media, there's a lot of ideas around human trafficking, right? And sex trafficking, you see these images of a stranger swooping in, stealing, things like that. But what the data shows and what we see in our community is it's often people that the person that is being trafficked knows quite well, might even be a member of their family. And often the person doing the trafficking has experienced significant trauma in their own story. And so it's important for us to also heal. And that's why we do a lot of work within prisons and with justice involved individuals who have been part of breaking the circle, because in order for the circle to mend, they must be a part of that circle of healing.
Totally agree. For many Indigenous communities, they are family, even if they are married into the tribe. Most will remain in our communities, so they definitely should be part of the solution also. And I do have a question from a participant. Mary asked, and this kind of goes along what you're already talking about, and I'm sure you probably already answered this, but so Mary asks, can you provide trauma-informed care without needing the victim to share their story? Because not all survivors are ready to talk.
Yes. Yes. And perhaps Guadalupe has more to share around this topic, but yes, it's that approach of I'm here alongside you. I'm with you. I carry story too. You don't need to share your story with me, but I'm here. It is definitely possible to walk in this way with even people who are holding their secrets close.
Guadalupe, I see you shaking your head. Please share your insights. No, can't hear you. Can't hear you.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So, yes, I think when we were, so this wasn't necessarily advocacy when we were interviewing our relatives in Minnesota, but one of the things that I learned was that I was asking about story. I was asking about like strengths, what services, did they, the interview team was. But I think the biggest, survivors were allowed to join our coalition, to be a part of a bigger movement to end gender-based violence, to protect Native women, to protect our communities, to keep our communities safe. And we cannot do this without the survivors leading that work and understanding that work, because they know they're the experts of their own lives. And so I remember, Lou, you had, right before I lost audio, I heard you say that sometimes, bad things, well, I'm recapping. Some bad things have happened to us, but they don't make us who we are. And so if we've had a lot of traumas that have happened to us, but I am a very complex person. I still identify as an Anishinaabe woman. I still identify as a mother. I identify at all these things. And I think that when we're talking about trauma-informed means that all of those pieces get to walk with me everywhere. I'm not just one singular story. I'm not just one experience that I had. I have multiple needs. And I get to decide, hopefully with my advocate or the people who are creating change, what is the loudest need that I want. I hope you don't think I need treatment when that's not the loudest need I need. Maybe it's going to be I need housing, because that's what keeps me in non-sobriety. Or I need a new pair of shoes. It could be from major housing, shelter, food, income, to even something that's not even. So we don't necessarily have to know the story to help our people. And then that's when we get we could get kind of judgy of who's deserving of help and who isn't. And so I really want us to be good relatives to each other and not do that. We don't have to listen to the traumatic parts of a story in order to believe a person that comes to us and says, I need support and I need help and this is why, until they get to trust us. And so if we're not walking our talk and not showing that in community, not showing up for our people, not showing up, and if we do, we're structuring it in a different way, I don't see why they would, because I don't know if I would. I wouldn't, so that's what I'd like to share about that.
That is so powerful. I'm so glad you touched on that, Guadalupe. It's that idea that I'm not the expert in your life. You are in the driver's seat. You are in the driver's seat of your life, and I'm just here alongside with you. And if you think about all of the places that have, all of the movements and structures that have historically been very harming to us and to our ancestors, it's somebody else telling us what we needed and how we needed it and when we needed it. It's that missionary approach, or that, that government approach. And so in this work in healthcare, we don't want to be repeating that trauma, that traumatization to people. Even if we disagree with what they say is the loudest need for them, it's listening and seeing and believing. It's so important that we're not a part of re-traumatizing.
Definitely.
Go ahead. I also say one more thing. I'm sorry. Yes. So we're talking about sex trafficking and working with survivors, but if we don't start talking about where the need comes from and why it's okay, socially acceptable, we will always be in this predicament. We will always be wondering how to serve our people. We will always be at this place, and we will never. And I think it was Vanita Carter, who was a executive director of Breaking Free, which is in Minnesota, and it was a survivor-led organization to help women out of prostitution and sex trafficking. She said, we will never end sex trafficking off of the shoulders or the backs of the survivors. We have to look at both pieces, and I know that Lou, you had talked about people bringing in people who cause harm. We don't have throwaways. And I think that is something that we think that go to prison for whatever and you come back out. There's no treatment in that kind of way to talk about racial, racial inequalities, poverty, homophobia, all of the isms that we deal with as humans in our intersectionalities of who we are and how we identify. I think that is something that we have to look at different in our communities, and not being silent about it. Not talking about sexual violence will not end sexual violence. Not talking about sex trafficking won't end sex trafficking, and we can't do it on the backs of survivors.
I totally agree, especially not just in regards to providing direct services, but also in regards to systems and their own accountability, and ensuring that the templates that are used benefit the people that we serve. So a follow-up question from an attendee. kind of like what we're already talking about, can you share some examples of what trafficking looks like in tribal communities?
It looked like Guadalupe, you were going to turn off your microphone. So,
Can you repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
Can you share some examples of what trafficking looks like in tribal communities?
I can share a couple of,
Please.
so doing the research that we did, one of the things that, the stories that I had, I can share a couple. One of the questions we asked the survivors was like, how old were you when you first got into prostitution? And so now language has changed in 10 years, but this person says, well, I didn't choose to get into it. I was so traded for a tattoo. Years old. So it can go from that, from young to, I've talked to with an elder who has now been a caregiver for the grandchildren because their child was heavily addicted to drugs and left all the grandchildren with grandma now. And grandma didn't have any ways to pay all of the bills and, to take care of the children, and there was no subsidies coming in to help as foster or as a person. So this person was getting on short on rent because now they have to buy more food. This person was like not, their fixed income could not help take care of 2 small children. So when it came to it, and the landlord actually asked the grandmother, well, I know that you could do this in order for whatever, in order to pay off some of your rent. That was how that person got introduced to into that transition of like exchanging sex for a need, right? Now, depending on how our communities want to look at this, you could say, oh, that's prostitution. Oh, but you know what I mean? But think about the ways that this person was put in a predicament where that's where they would have or would have not have made a different, they might have made a different choice if they had different circumstances. But those poverty is a big vulnerability. Homelessness, big vulnerability. 98% of the people that we interviewed were either currently or previously homeless. American Indians were not, and Alaska Natives were not homeless before colonization. So it puts us in a different vulnerability.
Definitely. Luanne, did you have anything you want to add?
just echoing what you shared, Guadalupe, around people experiencing homelessness. Alaska is very unique in that a lot of our communities are off the road system. And when folks come to the main hub communities, be it for healthcare, for university, for other things, they come, and sometimes hard times can befall someone and they're disconnected from their home community, have really no way of getting back. Transportation, the state is huge, and getting home can be prohibitively expensive. And so you're in a vulnerable situation, and in somebody that you know and that you trust approaches you and is kind and is taking care of you and is giving you, has your back when your back is up against a wall. This is something that we see again and again, particularly with young people that get like trapped in the urban centers with no way of getting home to their home community. And being approached, worked with one situation where it was a number of young women that were attending university, dropped out for whatever reason, didn't have access to any kind of resources, and they were very vulnerable to the situation, and this is what happened. But the trust, I was talking with I remember I was talking with another leader in the community who works within trafficking, and he told a story of what one young person told him. And the young person told him, the difference that someone can make by just giving me eye contact when I was on the street, like I was a human, was I'm trying to remember exactly how he said it because it was so powerful. This young person was being trafficked, but someone walking by, the young person was at a gas station walking by, instead of kind of doing that ignore thing because we don't want to be approached, you know, just keep it, gave this person eye contact and smiled. And that was, it like gave him the strength that they needed to be able to go and access shelter. Like it was something just, it was such a stunning story to me, because it was like, I can do that. Any of us can do that. We can look and see people when we're passing them on the street, but that young person, for them, that was a difference, and made a difference for them to go and seek help in a really desperate situation. And I wish he was on this call so he could tell the story. I'm saying it wrong, but that was the main message of it. It was so impacting.
In another participant question, or along the same vein, what are the most challenging barriers to survivors, trafficking survivors, to secure housing stability? What have you seen in your experience, in your areas? Let's go ahead with you, Luanne.
I would say one of the things that's a big struggle in our community right now is access to housing is one of the big ones. There are so many barriers. If you don't have a safe place to lay your head at night, you're not going to be able to show up for your job interview, be able to attend your job if you don't have, here we're very spread out, so you need access to reliable transportation. There are so many reasons why it's as all of us know, it's not about just trying harder. You know, these are some very impossible challenges that people are facing. And right now in our community, we're seeing a lot around housing.
I agree. I think one of the things that I'm noticing about survivors within housing is too many police reports, or they have committed they have a record, and so now they can't get any housing, even though maybe that was a charge because of an abuser, because of a trafficker. When I was speaking with some survivors, the person who was being trafficked sexually was not just doing sexual favors, they were also selling drugs also too. So there was a two thing. So there was a two charge thing that could happen. Or they were never even given money. That was how they were paid, through drugs. And so I just think, like, we have to rethink of the way that we want to have our communities be. And listening instead of that individualized, well, you made some bad choices, but understanding on how all of the oppression and all of the things that have happened to a person make the community not always have the best choices. And I know as Native communities, we are trying to get out of that. We are trying to restructure who we are and build services for our people and build new programming and build strength structure things for our youth and our elders, and trying to combat the genocide that we're dealing with. And I think that there's I think how do we let go of that individual family unit that was very pushed down our throat through assimilation, and go back to what does it mean to have a true community? Because when you have true community and accountability with love, respect, and humility, and bravery, and all of the other grandfather teachings, it's hard to people to not have accountability within that, because we expect everybody and we need everybody. So holding you accountable when you do harm means that I still love you, and this is what it could look like. This is what the community wants it to look like.
Greatly appreciate the content shared, love the experiences, the challenges, and the stories that's been going on so far. I know that we're coming up on time. Well, we've got a few more minutes. So a reminder to participants, please put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. There are two definite comments that I want to address before we run out of time. And one is, can you talk about the issues with law enforcement, how they can better address or serve tribal communities in Guadalupe? You kind of already talked about that, but can you provide some more details in regards to that?
And how law enforcement can assist
Issues-
better?
Talk about issues with law enforcement, how they can do better address and serve tribal communities.
Well, I think, my personal opinion, okay, only Guadalupe Lopez's personal opinion, but I feel like law enforcement, the whole structure, it was based on rounding up people of color,
Yeah,
Black,
exactly.
Indigenous,
Yes.
right? So it's a system that's working great. And then we changed it up or whatever. Now we have tribal police. But it mirrors the same as the rest of the United States in the ways that works. So if we really want different change and we want to see something, I think it's going to take all of us to restructure what does that accountability and safety look like for our people. It was based not with our intentions, our best intentions.
Exactly. I always talk about how the system templates that we use as tribal nations is doing more harm than good. But I know, Luanne, you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And one of the approaches that we have taken, so the process that we use of hearing story, sharing story, and kind of that the process that we use for our training intensives, we've actually modified that to use with law enforcement. And we do trainings with law enforcement and first responders as a place for them to process their PTS, their post-traumatic stress. And the really interesting thing that we have, it's really exciting because they're coming in, they're finding a safe space to process and talk about post-traumatic stress, but they're being taught by Indigenous people, led by Indigenous people, facilitated these sessions by Indigenous people. Their mental model there is, it's so fascinating to see it change before your eyes. And when they go out in the community, they are looking now at our community members differently. They've had these experiences and they're looking at what is the story. And the beautiful thing is now that we've done this with them, we have their commitment and their trust, where we're doing actually the Alaska court system, Anchorage Police Department, the Alaska State Troopers, to name a few of the organizations, has committed to us to have us come in and do trauma-informed training for justice-involved individuals for their staff, and corrections, Department of Corrections as well, because they have gotten a taste of this safe space and the impact of story. Now they want us to come in and train their staff to do better. So it's influencing and shaping systems and through the power of story.
Luanne, can you give just a little bit what that agenda kind of looks like, so we kind of have a feel for what you're training on?
So it's really intensive. It's with, when we're talking about with law enforcement, it's about a 3.5-4 day long training intensive, long hours. And you're hearing like different topics around trauma triggers, shame, post-traumatic stress, different things. And you're hearing speakers, and then you go into small groups like talking circles to process the ways that you connected to the story. So your own trauma. And this process is being led by our organization. So they're coming into a tribal organization and processing those things, and it's changing the way they move in the community. And like I said, and now being now with the commitment from them to have us come in and retrain their staff.
I'm sure you'll probably get requests on what that looks like, and if you guys are willing to go wherever to provide that training. Sounds excellent, very needed. A lot of applause in the chat in regards to the change, in regards to law. We know it's a long time coming. Guadalupe, did you have something else you want to add?
I do have another resource, and I'm so sorry that I didn't previously give it to the organizers. So My Grandmother's Hands by Resme, I think is a powerful book. I'm actually like chapter 4. It talks about anti-Blackness, and people might not think that that impacts us as Indigenous people, but it does, because of how that has, how that impacts our community. We definitely have colorism in our community. We definitely have a whole bunch of things that were taught to us in the assimilation piece that keeps us separated from each other. And so the reason why I'm saying that is because they are talking about law enforcement and the way even that trauma impacts law enforcement, or if there are people, or if they're law enforcement of color, and how that impacts. I'm not saying that that's an easy job, and it's going to take all of us to reconstruct on what that could, how our safety can look, because I want our law enforcement just to be just as safe as everybody else. So I have to, it's a tough job.
Excellent. I love the conversation. Excellent, excellent materials. So this is one comment by Gerald, question anyway by Gerald. Any comments on spiritual needs? Luanne, let's go with you first. Any comments on spiritual needs?
Spiritual needs.
Yes.
We are whole people. We are whole people. And parsing us out into pieces, our bodies separate from our spirit, separate from our, all of those things. That's an inheritance of trauma and colonialism, right? So we are whole beings, and employing spiritual practices in everything that we do, and in making that just part of the fabric of everything we do. It's not a set aside thing that we indigenize something by tacking this on. No, it's just who we are, what we do, how we move is healing in and of itself. And the really interesting thing is with the data we've been able to gather is one of the things that we measure is spiritual connectedness. Yeah. And seeing statistically significant increases when people come out of our programming, and they're focused on healing from trauma, but the outcome is that they are feeling more spiritually connected. And so we have, I say Family Wellness Warriors, we also were gifted a Denina Athabascan name this year. So after 20 years of doing this work, we were gifted a name, and it's the word, it's Denina Athabascan. I just learned this week that it actually is also a Cree word, but the Denina Athabascan meaning, it's Nuiju, and it means returning to our true selves. Yay. And that's the idea of everything that we do, is returning to our true selves. The ways, those good ways that our ancestors gifted us, we're returning to those things. Returning to those strengths. So, yes.
I love that. I love that. Guadalupe, did you have anything else you want to add?
Yes, I think being able to talk with survivors, one of the things that was really important was being welcomed in to ceremony. And ceremony doesn't always have to be maybe, sweat or whatever your community, because not all communities sweat. So whatever it is, ceremony can also be come sit with me, let's drink water, let's pray, let's sing, let's do something, but being welcomed in, because a lot of times I think that the trauma of being used in sex trafficking, the domestic violence, the sexual violence that followed up to that, or how it's playing out, there needs to be some place safe where a person can go just to be their whole self. So that is something that I want to say. So being a good relative and seeing them without having to hear the story, having to whatever, and letting them know how they're still sacred.
And part of what I want to add is that when you're looking for, especially for those who are not familiar with the cultural or indigenous practice or experts in the community is please vet, especially systems people, please vet who you're recommending or that you people go to. Those are key in the safety of our people, even if they've been long time longhouse or leaders or language experts. Vet them before sending our people that way. We want to ensure we no impact of more harm with them.
Thank you so much for saying that again. That's definitely true. And when people are talking about somebody in the community, I hope we start to have those discussions too.
Definitely. My practice when I came here, because I'm born and raised Nez Perce in Northern Idaho, and I came to the Umatilla Reservation. So in looking for people to provide some of those indigenous practices at our events, community members said, "Oh, this person's great." A lot of people said, "This person's great." So my practice was I talked to their partners and I talked to their kids and those close to them, and they tell me they override what the rest of the community members say, because they're the ones who you could go to vet, important for any community. Thank you for that discussion. I love having these pieces brought out, as a lot of people don't really think about those pieces. Thank you, participants, for these excellent questions. I do have another question from Mary. Her question is, when working with these survivors, what would be your #1 suggestion on best practice working through their trauma? Again, when working with these survivors, what would be your #1 suggestion on best practice working through their trauma? Guadalupe?
I would suggest you let them lead that. I wouldn't know. It would have to be the person, and they might not even know. They really might not know. It's just so compacted. So maybe an example of what you could do for a survivor is help them get some space from that trauma so they can have breathing room. And maybe they just get an hour of space when they meet with you, and whatever that is. So that way they can see it clearly in a different way if it's not sitting on their chest. And there's different exercises that you could do with that. You could have them use stones and then have them take whatever is bothering them and putting stones, physically moving them away from them so they can kind of that physical memory, because trauma gets stuck in our DNA fibers in our physical body. It gets stuck. And so sometimes even moving a stone and saying, okay, I'm taking this trauma and I'm moving it over here and I need more space from that. That could be an exercise you could do. You could have them take a piece of paper and physically rip something so that they're getting some space, and let them what that is, so they can decide. They are the experts and they will let you know. And even if you're service providers and helpers, and the more questions you ask that are not correct, they will let you correctly too what they need. They'll, so don't be scared to be wrong.
Yeah.
As far as well, do you need, what about this? Or an example. And so they're like, no, that's not it. Well, that's one step closer to the right, because now you know that that's not it. So I think as an advocate, I was always scared not to always know the right thing to say or not have the answer, which is, it's not my job to have the answer, because I'm there as a partner walking and not here's where I want to say where we can make change as service providers, is making sure that our institutions are trauma informed. If we, as a social worker, as a medical provider, as a law enforcement, are feeling oppressed in our position, how do you think that bleeds out into the community? So if we're working for an organization that is not trauma informed and or has really oppressive practices, where the staff is not happy, where they're not being heard, they are not going to be far from that treating the community in such. Not all the way, but they'll say, well, I can't do that because my hands are tied, or whatever excuses I've heard in the past of some service providers going oh, I'm sorry, we just don't do that here. So interrupting the institutional bad habits,
yes,
that will prevent a survivor from wanting to hang out with us and get services from us.
Definitely. Luanne, do you have anything you wanted to add?
I think you covered it really well, Guadalupe. I just want to underscore what you said of they're in the driver's seat. Let them guide what is the most important. And if they're living in survival, which it could definitely be the case, it might be those things like housing, safety, things like that. But let them guide.
So Dana has a question, and this has to do with the individuals who cause harm. When you work with individuals who cause harm, are they willing to work with you? Do they feel guilt or shame? Go ahead, Luanne.
So that's a really important part of the piece. They have to be willing to work. We're not forcing this healing process on them. They have to be seeking it. So that there's an internal, already there's some internal stuff going on. They're invited into the process, but it's their choice to engage. And so I would say a majority of the people that we work with that cause harm, there is a great deal of shame and remorse, but there is a fraction where there's a disconnect, and that we have found that as well. But a majority, it's that trauma-informed response of unpacking their own suitcase of trauma. What is it that is leading to these behaviors? Where and the other piece is one thing that's a really important piece of the trauma-informed response, when people are finally trusting and saying and actually owning the harm that they caused and are sharing those types of stories, for us to be trained in how to receive those kind of stories, because oftentimes we were harmed in the ways that they are sharing that they have caused harm. So we can be traumatized and we can be triggered in receiving those kind of stories. So we have to also, as leaders in this process, be really active in our own healing journeys. So we can be, we can have capacity for those stories, because those are hard stories to hear. When someone is sharing how they harmed children or how they harmed women, and those are hard stories to hear and to bear. And the other thing is, we do not rescue them out of those feelings. We don't rescue them and say, well, I can see that you're working hard to be a better person now. That's a rescuing kind of response. We honor them for their courage, and we appreciate them for their courage to share. And we can say things like, you know, I hear how you're facing the harm that you caused, and you're feeling the weight of that right now. And I want to honor you while you're doing that. But it's not a placating, a rescuing, oh, you know, it's okay, that's in the past. No, we let someone sit in that healing process of feeling it, feeling the weight, and owning the weight. And that's a part of the healing process.
I love that response. Guadalupe, I see you.
I would like to add a little bit too. I totally agree with you, Lou. And I would like to add what social change needs to happen in order for your community, and it's going to look different from village to village, pueblo to pueblo, you know, whatever it is, to understand that, yes, when there have been times where some people who have not been hurt still hurt people too. So that's a reality as we have. And we live in a system that really, or we live in a world that really actually objectifies humans. Top of that, and then we have misogyny, which is the hate of female gender. But yet we, as Indigenous people, never really always had that belief. Whether you're matriarchal or patriarchal, there was still a balance there. There was still or if there was like more genders within that. I think that that's something that we could be exploring about what that means for your people. How do you get back to that? How do you learn about that again? And not having such a dichotic thinking of yes, no, right, wrong, boy, girl, whatever it is, one aspect to another. And And I think when working with perpetrators, understanding what do we keep alive in our societies that help them continue to be perpetrators, because all the perpetrators, they've all had like good teachers and people, whatever, but what is the shift that allowed them to say, I get to cause harm and this is why? Either they thought they could get away with it, they thought that they were deserving, they thought that they could objectify the other person, whatever it was, it could have been all of them. So I think that there's, we have to talk about how do we, as everyone, keep this, the systems alive that allow perpetration to even happen. And that's on all of us, not just people who decide to cause them.
Totally agree. Definitely love everything that you guys have shared. Excellent panelists. So one sentence. We have a large audience today who are looking for answers to build their work, start their work, or continue their work. One sentence that you guys would leave with the participants. Luanne.
I was hoping you would call on Guadalupe first. One sentence. What's coming to me is the words of that elder again, and that is, in order for the circle to mend, everyone must be a part of the circle, even those that ruptured it. And when I was talking about the system's approach to working within even law enforcement, that's a part of working with those that are causing ruptures as well. So it's that, and I love that you said it. And this is not a sentence. I love that you said that, Guadalupe. It's not a dichotomy. It's not a this or that. You know, we live in the layers of gray in between, and that's something I think powerful to learn to be there.
Guadalupe, sentence.
I don't know if it's a sentence, more like a.
It's okay.
No. So I think what I would love to say is that we need everybody. That's it. We need all of the ideas. We need all of the efforts, and we need all of the love and truth. And we have to repair the harm first before we can even start to make changes. And so what does that look like for Native communities to have harm repaired after so many generations of policies have been put on us in a different way? And so how do we move forward with that, with all of the survival and love and the humor and the beauty that all of our communities have? Yes, that's my sentence.
Thank you. And while I did not get to all the questions in the Q&A, any of the questions that were not answered today will be included in the Q&A summary document and posted to the center's website. Thank you, Guadalupe and Luanne, for sharing your experiences with us today. This has been a very informative conversation, and hopefully you all have heard some new insights for safeguarding youth survivors from human trafficking. Our panelists will provide responses to any of the unanswered questions today. Taisha, back to you.
Thank you, Desiree. Thank you, Luanne. Thank you, Guadalupe. Thank everyone at this time. Just let's take a deep breath and exhale. So much good words shared today, good medicine, stories, our hearts, our experiences. This was a phenomenal talking circle. Like I said in the beginning, we had a great panel, and you saw and you heard their experiences. And I think if you were monitoring the chat, and that these ladies will be busy with all these questions that we didn't answer. They will get to those questions. Each of you will receive a link to our resources, as well as a link to the recording of today's session. So you will be able to review, and I saw one comment on there, like they're going to probably have to watch this more than once, because there's just so much good content here today. And that's what these circles are that's why we do what we do. We want to share these resources. So the center, again, sponsored this talking circle, the Human Trafficking Capacity Building Center. We offer no-cost coaching to tribes and tribal organizations looking to start, sustain, and grow their anti-trafficking work. We put our contact information in the chat. If you want to reach out to us, we are here for you to share information and to support the work that we and everyone else is doing in tribal communities, such as these fine members of our panel. I mentioned there is a closing poem, and I'd like to introduce and give time to Eileen Cruz, and she will be offering our closing poem today to end the good work that we shared today and our good thoughts and good prayers. And the poem, we hope, stays with you, and we fill the day with all the good work that we intend to do, and continue to share our voices with others and our love for each other. Eileen?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So today I wanted to share from my recent book, Caught in My Thoughts. This was a place where I was able to uncover a lot of emotions that I was going through and was able to heal and also help others do the same. So I'll just go ahead and read that. This was me, drowning in a lifeless garden, performing for your acceptance. Like a chained door, your back only faces me. See me. My stomach sits in fragments of unspoken words as tears beg for your attention. Climbing this mountain when love does not exist. Locked away from your affection. Hiding behind darkness. My heart is deserted. Cover up this body of emptiness. Living by every thought. Thoughts that tie me down. It's that memory that is attached to childhood hurts. Afraid of rejection, the ache, the feeling unloved. Do you see me? Daddy never did. He was looking through the eyes of alcohol, given from a heart that could not see. I am no longer in that place. I have done nothing wrong. I am not helpless. I have a voice and I will speak up. With or without you, I am worthy of love. I was not born to be unloved. Being unloved is what happened when I was born. It's not who I am. It's not what the world has for me. It was made to be loved. I was made to be loved, to share love, to embrace love, to give love. I am loved. This is me now. A smile that helps others smile, and a heart willing to accept the vulnerable parts of me. A mind that speaks a story of real life. A voice to help talk about the truth of why it's important to be you. Today I realize inside holds a superhero. It's that child that was created to do more. So I rise up and give that child what it deserves. Try it. Wrap your arms around yourself. Smile and give yourself a hug, a big one. Hold yourself for a moment and take a deep breath. Be you. Love yourself because no person can love you better than you. You can love your flaws even if the world does not. It's okay to make mistakes. Give yourself a break. Life is hard enough on you. Let go of everything your mind has told you this morning, last night, or this past week. Allow yourself to experience love, peace, joy, and freedom. Well, wait, don't move on until you hug yourself because you deserve it. Thank you.
Beautiful, Eileen, beautiful. Be you. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, everyone, our panelists, our moderator, you out there in virtual world from all the locations that you shared with us. Thank you. Be you. We look forward to having you join us on a future talking circle. Goodbye.